you so much for taking out the time to be with us here. And I think we are going to have a very good session. So looking forward to it. So I'm going to be introducing the moderator for the evening today, Dr. C.S. Rajan. So Dr. Rajan is a senior consultant surgeon at Malia Hospital, Columbia Asia Hospital, Vikram Hospital, and Annaswamy Mudliar General Hospital in Bangalore. He comes with about 32 years of distinguished surgical practice, and he's also right now managed administration at many corporate institutions in Bangalore. He's also had a lot of teaching experience. He's been a mentor and guide for many students throughout his career. So thank you so much for joining us today. I will pass on the baton to you now to take it forward from here.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that introduction. I hope I'm able to live up to the big words you've used. Today's world is changed. We went to sleep on one day on 17th or 18th of March, and on the next day, the whole world has changed. And we had some measures in place, and we all withdrew our practices for a few days. And now we have learned, like our Prime Minister Modi said yesterday, we have to learn to live with this virus for quite some time. And hence we need to adjust ourselves and our modes of work. And we, especially as surgeons, what are those specific modes of work to be able to deliver the surgical service in a continuing and safe manner. So thank you very much, Medtronics, for having this little discussion. I'm extremely proud and privileged to have with me Dr. H.V. Shivaram, a very senior surgical person of Bangalore, the head of department and consultant surgical oncologist at the Aster CMI Hospital in Bangalore, besides working at other mission hospitals also. He is a known surgeon for his expertise at bariatric surgery and in the abdominal wall reconstruction of hernia strictus surgery. He is also an important member of the Association Surgeons of India, being the executive committee member representing Karnataka, and also in charge of the webinar part of the ASI outreach. Along with welcome, Dr. Shivaram.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I'm sure you're going to enlighten us with all the technical details, which we will exchange. Also with us, we have a very, very smart and young gentleman who is Ravik Patil. He is the product manager of the energy-based devices of Medtronics, and he's going to give us a little insight on some of those things that are beyond the heads and minds of surgeons, but he will clarify doubts related to surgical smoke and aerosol generating procedures, etc. So I'm going to start this off by asking Dr. Shivaram to give us a brief review of the whole process of what is happening and how we are going to be able to tackle it. After that, we'll have a few question answers. I want all viewers to note that there is a chat box at the bottom of your screens. And if you click that chat box, you can type in your questions, and these questions will be addressed to will be answered by either Dr. Shivaram or me, and to the best of our ability. There is also another box which says question answers. If you want, you can put your question answers there. Our moderator will pick them up and they will share it with us, and we try to answer all of them. This is going to be an interactive session, and the more interaction we have, the more we will be able to share with everybody. So with that little introduction, I request Dr. Shivaram to start his presentation on COVID, the surgeon today, and work, the surgical work.
Thank you, Dr. Rajan. Thank you very much for moderating the session today. It's very, very great privilege for us to have you, sir, here. You can see my slides are okay?
Yes, your slides are clearly visible, yes.
Okay. Dr. C.S. Rajan is a very senior surgeon, very experienced. I'm sure he will throw more light, and between two of us, we will be able to clear some of the doubts which are there in the surgeon's mind, and also how to go further with this pandemic. I think there are a lot of things, as Dr. C.S. Rajan told, we have to change in our practice and day-to-day life. So let us see how we all can work together and conquer this virus. So I need not say anything much about the coronavirus. All of you have been bombarded with so many webinars, and knowledge about this is very good. And only worry for surgeon, whether he is practicing in the rural area, city, or in the metropolitan town, city, is that this is the still transmission which is happening. And without our knowledge, this can enter into our respiratory tract system and then create havoc in the healthcare workers. So how we can protect ourselves in this era of pandemic? So that's what we are interested, and to care for our co-workers and the healthcare workers who work along with us.
Dr. Shivan, can you make the presentation into the presentation mode, please?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Full screen. Thank you.
Thank you. So the biggest weapons we have to fight this invisible enemy is a simple soap, the hand sanitizers, masks, and of course social isolation, staying at home and avoid the social interactions too much till we come out of this pandemic. So we have weapons, we are very, very simple, but we have to be all the time vigilant and use this very carefully to fight this enemy. So protect ourselves or protect yourself should be the mantra at present. Not only serving our patients and their community, we have to protect ourselves. Most important is to protect our face. So this enemy can enter into us through our mouth, nose, and the eyes. So most important is to protect these three organs. So protect your face, 50% of the work is done. So don't allow, if you are operating or anything, allow the surgical smoke and other elements to go to your lungs, because they can contain the viral particles. Practice hand hygiene all the time, whether you are at home or outside the home. Hand hygiene is very, very important, because the fomite transmission, we know, you touch somewhere else and then you touch your face, you can get infected yourself. The most important other point is treat every patient during this pandemic era as possible COVID positive. Even though the COVID test may be negative, there may be 20 to 30% of chances we may missing it, and these patients may be positive. So those are the four things we should do in this era of pandemic. So what is a pandemic? Again, all of you are very well versed about it. An epidemic of disease which has World War time. There was a huge pandemic, that is the Spanish flu, and the death that time was 50 to 100 million. So you can imagine the amount of people suffering. And this is only an estimate, because it was First World War time, and no data was accurate. There was a lot of things which was hidden. After that, there were another 3 or 4 pandemics, and all our experience, or the experience of the World Health Organization, by studying these pandemics, and the predictions come because of that. The worry of everybody today is not what we are facing now. This is the first wave, what we may get later. If you see the Spanish flu, the death rate was much higher in the second wave than the first wave. And there was a third wave also. So that is the worry now everybody is facing, whether our COVID pandemic is going to end here, or it is going to worsen and cause other waves in future. See, the prediction from the World Economic Forum and other things are that the coronavirus pandemic may not only last 2020, it may go to 2021 and may get up to 22 also. And it may not halt totally unless 60 to 70% of the population of the world becomes immune, or you get a good antiviral drug or the vaccine. So those are all the predictions, and it's very, very difficult to predict at present. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention has said there are 3 scenarios possible from here on. That is, the first scenario is it will be lurking again and again, and small peaks may come and then disappear. So we may continue for 1 or 2 years. The worst prediction is the big second wave coming back, and again we are going to lockdown mode and suffering more and more. So hopefully that should not happen. That's the worst scenario we can expect. And other thing is the small, slow burn effect for over the years. So it's very difficult to say at present what will be the prediction in future. Everything is possible. So that's where we have to get prepared. So instead of be reactive at that time, let us be proactive and get prepared in our mind and also our physical situation. You all know this Charles Darwin's words. It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent species. It is the one that is most adaptable to the change which will survive. So this is what we have to think, how we can adopt 100% to this new pandemic situation. Change is the only thing which can help us to survive and come out of this problem. So, ladies and gentlemen, 2020 is not the year for any heroic surgeries, not to expand our business or the hospitality industry. It's not the year for profiteering. It's not the year for travel and for the conferences and the social get-together. All these things, probably we may have to give it up in the year 2020. But this is the year for survival. This is the year for the helping each other and coexist and see that how we can as a community survive this problem. Survival itself will be the biggest achievement in 2020 and probably in 2021 also. And that's where we all have to change and put all our expertise and knowledge together. As surgeons, we have various roles. It's not just only the surgery, and we may be called to the emergency room. We may have to do the consultation in the outpatient. We may have to do some smaller OPD procedures and surgeries, and then take care of our follow-up patients. We have to do ward rounds and the inpatient care and emergency surgeries, surgeries in the elective surgeries as and when they are become safe, and also the teaching of our younger colleagues and postgraduates. So there are so many hats a surgeon has to wear during his day-to-day life. So for all these things, we have to get prepared and adopt and change according to the situation. The dress code definitely will not be the same as so there is no role for suit and boot and ties and all those things. Probably we'll have to change. Already so many people have changed, and sometimes I was the one who was wearing tie all the time. Nowadays, many people don't even recognize me because with the mask and the simple shirt and pant and shoes, and when we go to hospital, better to wear the hospital scrub. There is no need of apron and extra dress, and when you come back, better to be on a simple dress. And mask is the new code which has to be whether not only you when you leave the home, everyone else will have to wear and take care of our ornaments like mobile and all. There is no other extra things required, no big watch, rings and valley, all those things. Better to be as simple and as possible so that we can clean all these things. Why there is so much importance to mask these days? If you see this, the left side is the corona infected patient. The right side is the healthy person. If the corona infected person doesn't wear mask, even if we wear mask, there is a 70% chance of transmission probability if you are nearer to the patient or the person. And the other situation, if the patient wears the mask, the corona infected, and the other person doesn't wear, there is a 5% chance only. But if both of them wear mask, this is what we have to insist. There is only about 1.5% of transmission probability. So you can see from 70% to 1.5% we can reduce if we just wear mask, simple mask when we go outside. As professionals, anyway, we will be wearing N95 mask when we do surgery and other things. But this has become very, very important, and this has become a moral obligation, not only to protect ourselves, protect everybody in the community and in the country. So if you are wearing a mask and other person is not wearing a proper mask, better you tell them and educate them, tell that it's important to protect not only the inward protection and also the outward protection, so that not only yourself and also the others, everybody is protected. It's a simple thing which we can do at this time. So coming to the surgery categories, this has been already now told many times and many of you are familiar with it. So during the lockdown, we were doing only the emergency surgeries and if necessary, the urgent surgeries. And as the lockdown goes off and we go further, we'll have to do the urgent electives, elective essential, and also the elective discretionary surgeries. So gradually, we have to get back to our surgical profession in a phased manner. So some of the examples of emergency surgery, which all of you must have done during this time also, which have to be done within an hour or so in the life-threatening situations like acute bleed or perforation, trauma, all these things. Urgent surgeries, which can wait within few hours, within 24 to 48 hours we have to do, like really acute appendicitis or cholecystitis, septic arthritis, open fractures, all these things. Many of them we have treated conservatively and tried to help, but sometimes we may have to operate in such cases. And the urgent elective, which we have to done within 2 weeks or so, cardiothoracic surgeries, aneurysms, all these things. Then elective essential, like 1 to 3 months. Most of them are cancer surgeries, which you cannot withhold for a long time with radiotherapy or chemotherapy. And elective discretionary surgeries, which can be done even after 3 months, like cosmetic surgery or bariatric surgery, joint replacement, all these things. So this is how we have divided the surgical procedures into different categories and tried to manage during this pandemic situation. And the emergency surgeries, many of us have done, taking all precautions. So to protect ourselves and also to guide the problems during this situation, the most important thing, whether a big hospital, small hospital, whether it's a city or a rural area, best is to have a hospital COVID committee or the infection control committee. So this is the one which is definitely going to guide us and also help us how to come out of this situation. This can consist of a hospital administrator or the owner of the hospital, infectious disease specialist if available, otherwise the physician, then the pathologist or microbiologist if available, and the surgeon or the anesthetist or the ICU specialist who is more involved with the day-to-day care of the patients, and the nursing in charge. If these people have a committee, so many of these, this is a simple thing which we can do so that they can make periodic guidelines and implement whatever guidelines are made. They need not meet physically, they can meet virtually like this in a webinar or on the video call and make decisions whenever required. So if you have a committee like this is like a think tank which can help us make guidelines. They can go through different guidelines because the guidelines and the recommendations are also changing, not only for professional organizations, even the government, the things are changing because as the situation changes, the red zone, green zone, or the containment, all these things will change. So somebody has to be abreast of these things and see that, yes, these things can be done. These are the precautions we have to take. For this, the simplest thing is to have a hospital COVID committee. Even in smaller hospitals, nursing homes, rural areas, this can be implemented and they can guide to these people. I get a lot of calls in the smaller places. What should be done? You cannot do like what you do in Bangalore or big hospitals. My suggestion is use available local resources, use the available local people, whether it is physician, surgeon, anesthetist, pool together. So if there is a smaller place, everything need not be done in all the hospitals. This is the time to put together all our resources and help our patients and also do our best to survive, come out of the situation. Better to have a local COVID or infectious disease committee for the town or the area, and they can meet virtually and give suggestions. Improvisation is the order of the day. So you need not have the very high-end PPE to protect. You can use whatever is, we'll discuss that also. And also this can protect us medico-legally or there is a problem from any patient side, all these things. So this is one important thing we can implement, whether in the rural area, city or medical college, whichever place. I think this will go a long way in helping us and protecting all of us. The issues with COVID-19 patient surgery, most of you are very familiar now. Aerosol generating procedures. This is the one which has put us on hold because of whether it is the tracheal intubation, tracheostomy, extubation, and also the laparoscopic procedures, many things, the endoscopic procedures, because many of the time these aerosols can be inhaled by the healthcare workers and surgeons, which can cause problems. So that's why the face protection and the protection from the fumes is very, very important. So that can cause infection because they contain viral particles. So many people ask, once you use cautery or harmonic scalpel, the virus, can't it get killed? Why are you worried about it? But what we are worried is the elements of the viral particles which are present in these plumes, the fumes and the materials, sometimes body fluid. So those things should not infect us, the healthcare workers. So that's inhalation is not like other smoke. This is quite risky and dangerous, especially in minimal access surgeries also. So when we use pneumo and all, we use electrosurgical devices. So the pneumoperitoneum can contain these particles, and when they escape outside to the OT, inside OT atmosphere, and when we inhale they can infect us. So this we have seen in many of the orthopedic surgeons who got infected, or the ICU doctors, all those things. The simple thing what we can do is check our OT, what is the air changes per hour in the OT. If there are more than 20 air exchanges per hour, we are supposed to have protection from these viral particles and inhaling. Most of the OTs have more than 20, that's more than 30 also. These are all requirements by the NABH auditing also. I'm sure you can, we may not be having the technical knowledge, better to ask the service engineer, what is the air velocity, what's the pressure. It is suggested that we should have a negative pressure OT, which may not be possible. Most of the hospitals may have a negative pressure isolation ward, but positive pressure also we can operate, but before that we have to take certain precautions. The air handling and filtration. Most of the operation theaters will have HEPA filters, so there is not much of worry, but we have to check all these things and then see whether everything is okay. Otherwise, it's better to make some modifications. These are not very big modifications which can be done to protect ourselves. Converting a positive pressure OT to a negative pressure OT is a big investment, but if we make these changes, that should be able to protect us. So what can be done in the OT? Appropriate protective equipments which can cover the face and the whole body without allowing any fumes to enter our body and liquid to contain it. Laparoscopy versus open, this again we have to decide depending on which is more beneficial to the patient and the surgeon and the available resources, everything. It's not that laparoscopy should not be done also. We have to take certain precautions. We'll look into that. There should be minimum number of personnel in the OT and the movements in and out of the OT should be minimum. Smoke evacuators when using electrocautery or the harmonic and all. There are certain smoke evacuators available that we will look into this, and also Ravi will also enlighten us on that. There are two types of filters available, HEPA filters and ULPA filters. Most of the OTs have HEPA filters, which is good enough for our enemy, that is the coronavirus. And ULPA filters is much more better if it is possible to have that. So what is important is no single effort will help. We have to take a multifaceted approach to fight this enemy. So there should be proper room air filtration, proper ventilation as we discussed, appropriate PPE, smoke evacuation devices, and minimal use of cautery, energy devices, and the duration of surgery, all these things. So if you are aware of these things, then it is very easy to fight these enemies. So operating in a pandemic era is an occupational hazard. So we have to take a lot of precautions and proper techniques, good instruments, shorten the surgery duration as much as possible, aerosol management and strict protocols in the OT. These are the things which can make it less hazardous and protect us. Various organizations have given us recommendations. SAGES has given so many things to do the laparoscopic surgery. You can all look into that, how to evacuate the air, CO2, how to create pneumoperitoneum, and also how it can be safely sent out of the OT, and how we can protect ourselves even if we are doing the laparoscopic surgery. This lot of people have known what is surgical smoke. So this is the one which is the byproduct we get when we use the cautery, harmonics, scalpel. Wherever the tissue gets vaporized, it can contain not only the smoke, it can cause the tissue particles, especially when there are viruses in the tissues, it can get vaporized. So we call it as plumes. So all these things, whether the cautery, vessel sealing equipment, ultrasonic, laser, bone saw, drills. So all these things can cause the lot of aerosols. That's why orthopedic surgeons have much more risk than the general surgeons. So we have to use all these important things. The there are a lot of equipments which have come up now. There are 3-4 companies which produce the how to say evacuation of the smoke from the body. So it's not a huge investment. Probably we should look at these things now to manage for another year or so. It should be able to help us. So the SAGES and also the endoscopic organizations, they have also said that it is better to have this safe CO2 evacuation system, looking at the whether it is the HEPA filters or the ULPA filters, and take the multimodal way of doing it. So negative pressure room is desirable, but not a must. Wherever possible, we can use that. Minimum number of persons we looked at. Limit the size of surgical team as much as possible. Avoid the operating room personnel stepping out of the OT and coming back and all. Minimum 1 hour time gap to be given between 2 procedures or surgeries. So that's why if you see the anesthetist also and the OT manager insist that between 2 surgeries, at least half an hour to 1 hour gap is there, so that the enough of air exchanges occur, and also the cleaning of the OT happens. Minimize the duration of surgery whenever possible. No surgical or nursing training during this period in the OT, because that will prolong the period of procedures. Avoid multiple and complex procedures. With this, we don't know how long it's possible. Anyway, for some time we can do, but we cannot prolong it for a long time. Reusable accessories are cleaned and disinfected with appropriate solution as soon as procedure is over. So we need not take any extra precaution. Whatever is regular, we are doing autoclaving or the ETO, all these things will kill these coronavirus. And for the fomite, you can use 1% sodium hypochlorite solution, cleaning for the OT tables, trolleys, all these things. So these are some of the things which can be implemented in most of the OTs possible, and we can take care of it. So laparoscopy versus open surgery, we already discussed. So how to manage the pneumoperitoneum and the plumes, and you have to take a balanced decision. If you ask us, the laparoscopic surgery is more beneficial to the patient, but little more risky to the surgeon. So we have to take and learn to avoid how to reduce the risk by appropriately dealing with the smoke, and better to avoid, if possible, the drains, Ryle's tube and catheters whenever possible, so that some of those things may be infected if the patient is highly contagious. So not possible all the time, so some of the time. So what has changed to me in the OT is, at present when we go to OT, instead of the regular mask, we wear the N95 mask, and this is, hospital has given us 2 or 3 N95 masks after the each day's procedure. This will be again sent back for the ETO sterilization. So this is not being used by anybody else except me only. So this is the one which can be used for certain time. And this is the disposable face shield which is being used in all the procedures. And if you see the anesthetist, so they are taking care that they need not use the high-end PPE or anything, but they are covered. The face protection is very important. N95 mask is wearing goggles and also the face shield and the full dress along with the shoe and shoe cover. If you see the nurse and also the surgeon, we are using the cover. This is water repellent dress, OT dress, and there is the face mask, N95 mask, and the specs, regular specs what we are wearing is okay. And the cap. So this will protect for our regular surgeries, what we are doing now. This is not the PPE which is recommended if you are doing in a COVID OT or COVID patient surgery. But this is the minimum protection we can do at present in our regular semi-elective surgeries or elective surgeries. When we go for post-operative care, it is better to have minimal staff, carefully see the patient, and if there is most important nowadays is to ask for the history of fever and cough, whether patient is post-operative also. Examine the chest and the CVS, and if there is any lymphopenia or anything, so when you check these things. Almost all of our patients now, we are doing the COVID test 24 to 48 hours before surgery, and then take them for the elective or semi-elective surgery. That is possible wherever the test is available. Principles of cancer surgery. Again, this is little different than the earlier. So look at the resources available, the anesthetist, ICU, HDU beds, and you cannot know that these are the immunosuppressed patient, all the case cancer patients. Many of them might have taken already the chemotherapy or the radiotherapy. So risks versus benefits, whether delaying is really worth it, whether we are delaying the diagnosis or the surgery. So whether there is any bridging alternatives like neoadjuvant therapy or staged procedure, and have a virtual tumor board, MDT, hospital infection committee meeting, so that this is the one which can protect us, and the consent for the COVID time is important, and look at all the recommendations and guidelines which will keep changing. So elective surgery on patients recovered from COVID disease. So this is another problem which we are going to face in our future time. So long-term effect of COVID disease is not yet known. Mild patients may be okay, but patients who had a severe disease, who were in ICU and who were in the intensive care with ventilators and all, there may be lung damage. So we have to carefully assess these patients when they come for surgery. Wait and watch policy for some more time. If we have to really do the surgery, better to involve the multidisciplinary team and then take a decision which includes the anesthetist and also the chest physician, and then take a decision whether to go ahead with surgery or not. Otherwise, they may not be the simple patients like others, and we may have to take more extra precautions. Another problem, even in a small area which people may face, is if you have operated on a patient and the COVID test may not be available that time, but later it becomes positive, or the patient develops symptoms of COVID disease and you do the test and they become positive. Then what to do? So all the hell breaks out in such a time. So what comes to your help is the hospital COVID committee or the infectious disease committee. They should have a meeting and carefully go through all the whatever has been happened. This is not to find fault, but to find fact and see that the interview all the people who were involved with the operation and the ward, OT, etc., and find out whether there was any lacunae in using the PPE or protection. Then there will be two situations where the preventive measures are taken, but there was some lacunae and you are worried whether the people will get infected. So in that situation, the healthcare workers should go for home quarantine for 2 weeks. They should take HCQ prophylaxis and daily twice temperature. And COVID test should be done maybe after 4 to 6 days later. And the areas should be sanitized, which may take about 2 days or so. The other thing is all preventive measures are taken. There is no lacunae. Then you should be rest assured that everything, there is nothing to worry. Healthcare workers can continue to work. And only thing we have to check is twice daily temperature. If they develop temperature, then better to quarantine them and check for the COVID. And however, better to monitor all these people for about 4 weeks. So what comes to our help is the most important is the hospital COVID committee or the infectious disease committee. So this is one which has been very, very controversial. That is the coronavirus testing. And what we are doing now is the RT-PCR. Many of the serological other tests may not be available. So this is where we take the swab from the nasopharyngeal swab and send for testing. Most of the things nowadays available within 24 hours, the reports. Some areas it may not be available. Wherever possible in our elective surgeries, better to do this and then do the surgery. Otherwise, we have to take precautions as if the patient is positive and then take the patient for the procedures. So this is the pre-surgery testing, that is the RT-PCR. This is the other test, the antibody test is basically to understand whether there is community transfer and the immunity is developing. So coming to the PPE, basically we have to see whether we are operating on the COVID patient or the COVID suspects patient and whether doing outside. See, when we are outside the OT, most of this is enough, and non-operating people also, if you are doing a minor procedure or taking care of patients. But when we are inside the OT, we have to take much more precaution. That is the full face shield, head cover, the face mask N95, the gloves, and the long sleeved fluid repellent gown. So you need not use the heavy, the PPE, but this can protect most of the things when we suspect. So there are different types of PPE. And this is the one which is recommended when we are operating on the in the COVID ward or the COVID patients. So this is, most of the thing is enough for the surgeon to wear in the OT and other areas. These are the PPEs, and there is a lot of modifications. Most important, what we have to understand is face protection and the body fluids which should not touch us. If they are repellent, that should be enough for our routine surgeries. This is not the way to wear the face mask without the face shield without the mask. Mask is important, whatever face shield we use. HCQ prophylaxis, again, there was a lot of controversy, but ICMR has recommended only for 2 indications: asymptomatic healthcare worker involved in the care of suspected or confirmed COVID case, and the asymptomatic household contacts of laboratory confirmed case. So these are the only 2 indications as present. Everybody need not take HCQ and it doesn't help. Sometimes if you take it without the prescription or the physician's approval, it may cause more risky also. This is the dosage, 400 mg twice daily on the first day and followed by 400 mg once a week for 7 weeks in this asymptomatic category of suspected or confirmed COVID contacts. And the other category, it's only for 3 weeks. So there are a lot of things which can boost our immunity in this COVID pandemic era. So all the surgeons should look at their immunity boosting, be physically active, do more exercise, yoga, pranayama, meditation. This can definitely help. Eating right, the good high fiber diet, the Mediterranean diet, stay dehydrated, good sleep. These are the 3 vitamins which can help us: vitamin C, vitamin D, and other vitamins, plus the zinc. So these things better to take for some more time, and especially other things, distance socializing, which means you can be definitely interact with phone or webinar with your friends, and especially avoid smoking, alcohol, and addictive substances. So younger surgical colleagues, we have lot to owe them and also to protect them. They are going through the tough time. They are worried about their income, their future, their profession, but nothing to worry. This time will also pass. So till then, let us refresh our knowledge. Let us write, let us do some publications, edit our surgical videos, which we had recorded earlier, teach others. Even if you teach one other person, take a class, it is a good learning. While we teach others, we do the best learning. We can write blogs, and you can put your all the videos in the YouTube channel. You can start your social interaction by Facebook page, website, and the motivational. So basically, let us acquire more knowledge, refresh our the clinical knowledge, and we can enroll out of the courses we can enroll. So in the midst of every crisis lies a great opportunity. It is an opportunity to upgrade ourselves and learn more and more. So ladies and gentlemen, let me stop here. I'm sure Dr. C.S. Rajan will throw more light, and I will also pitch in whenever there is requirement. And I'm sure we will come out stronger from this pandemic crisis, and we all work together, learn together, and emerge victorious. Thank you, everybody. So I'm sure now Mr. Ravi will throw some more light. Over to Dr. Rajan.
Thank you, Dr. Shivaram. That was a very exhaustive coverage of what is a complex matter affecting the surgeon, made as simple as we could all understand each step. I deeply appreciate your inputs, and I'm sure they're of great value to our surgical colleagues. While this has been going on, I have been answering a number of queries. There are some more queries on the side that we can now tackle together as we now move on to Ravik Patil, who is the expert on the energy-based devices and about surgical smoke and how we tackle it. Ravik, are you there? Ravik? Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yes, sir, you're audible. I think Ravi had some trouble with the network. I think he just joined back in.
Okay. If he's
Meantime,
not there,
take some questions then. No?
Yeah, maybe so you can proceed on to some questions. I'll just let you know as soon as he's back.
Yeah. Right. Dr. Shivaram,
Right.
directly asking you, in a routine day for a surgeon, an everyday surgical day in a surgeon's life, we all set out from home, right?
Right,
And
right.
what would be an appropriate dress to wear to reach the hospital, and what would be the mode of transport? Because we all have different things. Not all of us have a car.
Right.
Some of us use metros, some of us use other forms of transport. So any suggestions?
Right. This is a very important question because this is where we can sometimes acquire infection also. So what is the guidelines and also suggestion is that be as simple as possible. When you are leaving home, wear a mask. It can be a simple mask, need not be N95 mask. You can wear a cloth mask also. So because nowadays that everybody is wearing, and we should wear a mask and do the hand sanitization before you go to your vehicle or something, and wear a simple shirt, pant, and a shoe. And if ladies, they can wear appropriately the dress. Better not to carry your watch, ring, big valet, and better not to wear tie and coat, all these things. These are the times where we have to change the dress, maybe when you go to the hospital. So better to be as simple as possible, and to travel, best is to use your own way transport. If it is not possible, if you have to take a Ola or Uber when it's available, so you should not sit next to the driver, sit behind, better to sit alone. And insist that driver also wears the mask, and when you go enter inside, again do a hand sterilization, and when you come out of the vehicle, better to sanitize your hand. So this will become your routine to carry a hand sanitizer with you, because soap may not be available everywhere. So a lot of people have to carry their mask, carry their hand sanitization and simple dress. And when you go to the hospital, again you will be checked at the entrance, your temperature, the whether you are wearing the mask, and again hand sanitization. When you go to the hospital, better to wear the hospital scrub, keep your dress in a different area, finish your work, and again when you are taking care of your patients and procedure, that time you have to wear N95 mask, otherwise a regular mask is enough. When you are coming out of the hospital, put your hospital scrub for the wash and wear your regular dress. When you are coming out, again do the hand sanitization. And after the travel dress, reach home, don't go and hug your children or anybody with the dress. Keep your shoes outside. Once you come inside, take out your clothes, put it for wash, and then take a shower, and then wear your home dress. Then only you touch your dear and near ones. I think this is the change we have to make in our surgeons' daily life. So if you have anything more to add, Dr. Rajan, please.
One of the things that is very, very important and not to forget is the mobile phone.
Right.
Now, all of us handle the mobile phone, and that is what's been proved to be a source of a lot of fomite transmission of infection. It is recommended that we use a Bluetooth connection that is activated and kept, and your mobile phone is hung in a plastic pouch around your neck. And if necessary, that would be the only way that it will be protected from acquiring infection while it is while you're moving around in the hospital or in other situations. So the contact to the mobile phone to be as minimum as possible. We cannot do without it, but if you have the activated Bluetooth and it is ready to record and cut calls, that would be the ideal way to deal with it.
Okay, that's a good point.
Yeah. The other thing that is important is we are all in different hospitals and different geography, different architecture, different layout. So it is important that hospitals now have an entry for the healthcare workers and the doctors to be separate from the entry of the patients. Doctors enter and all staff enter, and there should be provisions made for them to change into hospital scrubs or hospital wearing attire, so that the transmission through the clothing of the healthcare personnel is reduced. So patients enter from one side and the doctors enter from another side would be an ideal situation. These are little modifications that can be done in most hospitals.
Right.
Secondly, it is also important that at the point of entry for the patient, there should be some form of triage that occurs at the entry. There should be somebody to screen the patient for a basic history of what they have come to the hospital for. And fever type or fever or respiratory type illness go into a separate queue, separate pathway that take them down the pathway for the medical people to see. Whereas those who don't have such a history and should not have a chance of getting contact can be isolated into another queue to another set of departments like surgery and other routine practices. So a triage of patients at the point of entry is important. Once the patient has come into the hospital, we in the outpatients need to change our way of going about a surgical case. The first history that one should ask for is the history of exposure. We used to always ask the history for contact or for sexually transmitted disease and other things. In a similar way, we have to ask them, listen, have you been traveling recently? Have you had any contact with a fever patient or so? And that kind of history will alert us onto whether this patient has had or is possibly having a chance of a COVID infection or not. In a physical examination, after we sit and take the history, it is also, while we sanitize and everything, we need to change the order of examination, that we make a quick look at the respiratory system. We need to check the lungs for air entry and adventitious sounds. And if we find that there are some findings there, perhaps withdraw from the surgical examination and get them to be seen by your medical colleagues first, before you actually do your abdominal palpation or your genital examination or your rectal examination and other things. So the order in which we are going to be seeing patients also needs to be modified a little bit. An important thing is how to schedule appointments. This is difficult in the large outpatient scenarios, but wherever it is possible, appointments need to be given and patients have to be told to come at specific times with only one relative, so that they can be seen, their time given to them is allotted and they can go. This of course means you'll be seeing less number of patients than in routine rushed hours, but we have to look at the safety. Not only your safety, you have to look at the other people's safety also. So it is necessary for us to adjust this for a few months. We do not know how long this process will go on. I remember initially when we had the HIV scare going on, everybody was so worried and so concerned, but gradually we got adapted and accustomed to it, and it became a kind of routine practice. So it is necessary for us to do these scheduling of patients to be seen. Dr. Shivaram, you have a case, you're sitting in your outpatient and they call you for a road traffic accident that's come into the ER with a suspected abdominal injury.
Right.
What would be anything specific you would do this, please?
Emergency room, again, all sorts of patients come. There may not be much of screening when they enter and all. So you have to be much more careful when surgeons enter the ER at present. So what I do is, first, when they call, we ask the history of what is available at that present, whether somebody has referred, ask the referring physician or the surgeon what he has referred for, and first who has examined in the ER, ask him the history, quick history, so that we don't spend much time in the ER room. And I go with with gloves and also the N95 mask to the ER, and make a quick examination and take the history, whatever is available at present from the others, and order for the, look at the chest also, as you said, and suspicion of any COVID disease. Otherwise, ask for whatever test is required. If you are doing an abdominal CT or anything, it's better to include the CT chest also in these patients, so that if there is any COVID problem, we may be able to recognize earlier. Our sensitivity becomes little more. If you are planning for surgery for this patient, emergency surgery, within few hours, bleeding or perforation, something, I will order for a COVID test, but I will not wait for the test to come back and then ask the appropriate surgery to be, and they go into the surgical, which is meant for the suspected cases or the COVID suspected cases. They will not go into our regular OT. So that's these are some of the precautions we take in the emergency room. I think Ravi has come back. Shall we finish off his? Ravi, you are ready?
Ravi, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I'm ready.
Yeah, please go ahead. We can make it a little brief so we can have more time for discussion.
Sure.
Yes, sir. Am I audible and my screen is visible?
Yes.
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 Okay. Thank you, Dr. Shivaram, and for the very informative sessions on the guidelines to operate in the times of COVID. And during the same time, all the healthcare workers, including HCPs and the OT staff and nurses, everybody are at the frontier in COVID. And at the same time, it is very important to make everybody safer also. So as a guideline, SAGES and EAES has also recommended to use all the precautions like PPE and 95 masks. In addition to that, optional optional smoke evacuation are also suggested. So I'll just brief you on our smoke evacuator, which is RapidVac smoke evacuation portfolio. So basically, this would be our Medtronic's response to the smoke evacuation. At the currently COVID-19 virus size is between 60 and 140 nanometer, and regions which are highly impacted by virus have set the surgical recommendation to manage the exposure to droplets, body fluids, surgical smoke, and aerosols. Currently, there is no research or data on the transmission of COVID-19 virus via surgical smoke is available, but however, other viruses have been known to transmit the virus through the surgical smoke. Medtronic also has not conducted any direct testing to evaluate interaction of COVID-19 and the surgical smoke evacuation product, but at the same time, we support the recommendations from the organization and societies which says that smoke evacuation device usage is recommended as a precaution whenever we are operating open or laparoscopic procedures. Wherever Medtronic smoke evacuation devices utilize ALPA filtration, which is ultra low particulate air filtration, which is 100 times more efficient than the HEPA filtration. And also ALPA filter has an efficiency rate of 99.9995% based on 0.12 micron particle size, but it is not a minimum size. It can also capture smaller and also larger particles. So basically, as a precaution, if smoke evacuation devices are used, it can help to prevent the aerosolization of the COVID-19 virus also. But as we say that currently there is no clinical paper and proven results which can treat COVID-19 as smoke evacuation devices. But I would still that recommendations are in the support of using the smoke evacuation devices. I'm pleased to introduce the RapidVac smoke evacuation device, which is compatible with our ForceStrat energy platform, ForceFX energy platform, FX8 energy platform, and Force ES generator. So all the Valilab generators are compatible with our RapidVac smoke evacuation system. It can also be used with any other diathermy device also, where we have optional accessories of remote switch activator is available. So basically, our RapidVac smoke evacuator is universal in the nature. The main benefits are the effective filter technology. We utilize 4-stage filtration, and also it has a RFID technology. So basically, how it can be useful in this era. The RFID will help to track a filter life or the remaining filter life, and we also can have a separate filter for based on the risk profile of the patients, and the same filter can be preserved and the generator ends the remaining filter life, and also multiple filter can be used simultaneously in the same generator. Also, ALPA filtration, which can provide the unit in the ultra low size particle also. Another benefit is the economical because it has 25 hours.
Ravi, Deepa here. Sorry to interrupt you. Can you turn off your video? I think your audio quality will improve. There's some network problem. Can you turn off your video?
Sure. I'll.
Yeah. Thanks. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
So you have 25 hours of activation time is calculated. So basically, whenever electrocautery, the monopolar cautery is getting used, at the same time, the smoke evacuation device also evacuation. So that overall duration of battery is 3 hours, and we only use smoke evacuation for 30 minutes of time. So the filter life will only be considered 30 minutes. So more than 50 to 60 series if the procedure time is less than 30 minutes of the electrosurgery activation. Also, there is easy to use. The filter also can be changed without any hassle, and the graphics are available for setting the airflow in the suction. So if we want to have a more evacuation of smoke, we can set to the where it will run at the 100% capacity, and also there is an indication available for the filter life, where each light will tell us that how many hours of filter is available. Like each light signifies the 5-hour filter life.
Okay.
The components of smoke evacuation systems are the source and the So is mainly generator which evacuates smoke at the maximum flow rate of 44 cubic feet per minute. And also it accommodates the filter and the overall RFID technology also. The filtration system is the HEPA filtration, and it is in four-stage filtration. The pre-filter captures large particles and some fluids. Also, HEPA filter will capture small particles, and then the activated carbon will absorb the gas and odors, and the final will be the post-filter. There are devices are getting used like tubings, where we have different option of lap tubings and open tubings. In lap surgery, the tubings will be attached to the trocar in the insufflator valve. The other end will be attached to the generator. And in open surgery, the tubings will be attached to the pencil or the whichever used. And the third one is the smoke evacuation pencils, which are available so that the smoke can be sucked at the point of origin, so the plume doesn't come to the face of the surgeon while the open surgery. The optional accessories are also available.
I think Ravi's
Lost him.
audio is not good. So we can
Yeah.
do question and answers. Yeah.
Yeah, please, sir, you can go ahead with the questions.
Right, Dr. Shivram,
Yes.
one of the things that struck me during your talk is, what about blood
Yeah, now I am audible.
Ravi will hold on because there is a lot of trouble. I think
Okay.
people got an idea of smoke evacuator.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, yeah. So, Dr. Shivram, I was just saying that when you were talking, it struck me, what about if your case needs blood transfusion? You're
Right.
operating, and how is the blood transfusion scene going to be managed now?
Okay, so this problem we may have to face another year also. This is a very important question. So there are now recently also the government conducted a blood donation camp and all. What is being done is very careful history of the donors is taken, that the travel history, again the fever history and the contact history, and also after that they will be examined by the medical officer who is in charge of the blood donation. And when they are all satisfied that there is no chance of COVID infection or anything, then their blood is collected, and that is quite safe to transfuse to the patients who are required, whether trauma or the other patients. But it is always better to go through the pathologist or the microbiologist, and also take the consent of the infectious disease specialist, hospital COVID committee if possible, or the physician, and then transfuse this blood. So let us protect ourselves legally also, and also ethically also in these cases. But as of now, there is no contraindication that blood should not be given or anything. Proper history and evaluation is important. Doing a COVID test in these patients and then transfusing is not required as of now according to guidelines.
Thank you, Doctor. You did touch about cancer patients, surgery for cancer malignancies. How long can they be delayed, or do they still come into the urgent category? Not emergency, but urgent category.
This is the elective cases. Within 2-3 months, we may have to do it. This is a very difficult problem. Everybody is going through that. If there is a chance and possibility of giving neoadjuvant therapy, then it is possible to go through that. But these are also again immunocompromised patients, and certain surgeries we may not be able to postpone at all, like a periampullary carcinoma obstructing or something. So those patients we may have to operate, take the multidisciplinary team approach, have a team management, and take the MDT consent, and then go ahead with the surgery if it is required, and also look at the resources available in your hospital, anesthetist, ICU, and the post-op care, everything, and then go ahead with the surgery. Otherwise, better to postpone and or send to the proper center for that.
If you have a COVID patient, this is a question that's come from the panel, the people listening. If you have a COVID positive patient, you have a COVID, and he develops an acute surgical emergency, can he be operated in an ordinary regular hospital, or should he be sent only to the COVID hospital centers?
See, as of now, the government is not allowing the COVID patients to be operated in every hospital. If you know that COVID is positive, they have to be sent to the COVID center.
Yeah.
Even in our hospital also, we are not allowed to operate a COVID positive patient developing a surgical complication.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Okay? They should be sent to the COVID hospital.
Yeah. I think it was a question that came in from some of the participants. So that's very well answered. A ticklish problem for an old chap like me. I am over 65. When do you think I will be able to resume surgical work? Or do you think I have to move into the role of mentor and supervision and teaching? My hands are itching. What will you say?
Yes, this is the dilemma a lot of people are facing, especially the people who are very active and suddenly they, without realizing that they are being told you are 65, you have that comorbidity, this comorbidity, you are high risk to catch infection. So this is where caution is required. I would say you take all precautions because life is more important than anything else, and take all precautions, and then if necessary, if you have to, can look at the outpatients and then take the help of your colleagues or younger colleagues to do surgeries which are within your reach, not a big surgery or long duration surgery like hernia or other hemorrhoids surgeries, and take all precautions. Short duration surgeries should be okay if you are eager to do and hands are itching, it not totally stop practice, but it is always better your mentorship role comes to, and your experience is very useful in these such categories. You can guide a lot of others, help them to become better surgeons, guide them and go more into the medical writing, teaching and mentorship, and lot of administrative roles and helping others should be possible in these categories. So better to be active, but less in the OT and in other places.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, that brings me to a kind of becoming a coach. You know, many players have a private coach. Tennis player has a coach. The basketball team has a coach. So probably some kind of a coach role for the senior surgeons can be envisaged, and we can still be usefully contributing. But my take is that if you're 60 years and you have significant comorbidities and your blood sugars are not controlled, please stay away. If your all comorbidities are well controlled till 65, perhaps you can do some surgery, but be careful. Above 65, it is mandatory that your health is more important, and you can restrict yourself, as Dr. Shivaram has said, to surface operations. That is like the breast or the thyroid at the maximum, maybe hernia repairs, rather than spend long times at the deeper in the cavity where the exposure and the chances of aerosol in contaminations are higher. You try to avoid those kind of surgeries. The mentorship role is something that we all can fit into.
A lot of surgeons are starting online courses, online coaching. So that is another lucrative or where it can be engaged with others. I think it may be more useful to the other younger generation. I think these are the things which will come over the years.
Yeah. I think these, as I'm replying also, this is a very, very evolving phase of our careers. Nobody knows the set rules. Nobody has set us a rule. We have to learn and set our own rules as per the situation and circumstances we are in. You did mention that the role of the HCQs for the people who've had direct exposure to a patient being about the only ones who can take some form of prophylaxis. I think it is not recommended for regular use, isn't it, doctor?
Yes, yes. Better not. A lot of people unnecessarily took it and they thought it will protect. Better not to take. See, I think better to stick on to the ICMR recommendation at present. And those are the two categories I said. They are the ones who take. Everybody need not take unless there is exposure or contact these patients.
what do you do in our smaller OTs and setups where there is no AC? So many OTs don't even have an air conditioner. They're running exhaust fans, or they're having standing table fans. Uh, that is the reality. We are having enough hospitals where surgeries are going on very successfully with that kind of a setup.
Right.
Do they take on COVID cases, or cases during COVID period, or refer them out?
So this is the risk they have to take. I think this is the time better to invest some amount and look at the safety of yourself and also the healthcare workers.
Correct.
Because if there is not enough of air exchanges in the OT, and whatever is inside the OT, the fumes or particles, it is not going out through a HEPA filter, it may be risk not only to the surgeon, but also to the anesthetist and also the other healthcare workers. Probably you should look at investing and then do it. Without these things, it is risky to operate with an exhaust fan or without enough ventilation and air exchanges in the OT.
Okay. What about the consent form? Do we have any difference in the consent form or consent taking process now, both to the patient and to the relatives?
Yes, in the pandemic era, it is medico-legally also said that when there is a lockdown, we all took consent form from the patient, even for consultation, whether they are okay to go ahead with the OPD consultation in this lockdown period and the COVID period. There's a chance of they getting infected when they come to the OPD consultation and contact with other people. So, but now if the patient has to go for operation, we have to include the COVID pandemic era we are operating, and there is a chance that they may get the contact somewhere in when they are in the healthcare system, and that consent should be included in the consent form also, which can be included in the other consent we take in the surgery, anesthesia, all these things. There is a risk not only to the patient, and also healthcare workers are also exposed to this. Whoever in the healthcare system, this consent is required at present.
Right. The other little thing is that the duration or the chances of exposure should be reduced for all the healthcare workers. So the shift system of working is mandatory. It's important. It should be implemented. Nothing more than 6 to 8 hours of work at the exposure areas of the hospital.
Yes.
Some teams are now going on to a weekly rota. They work for 1 week and then they take a full week off so that they recuperate and get on.
Right.
So these kind of adjustments of staffing and rota systems will also be part of the management in the COVID era. So that is another thing that is part of the work protocol that may have to be changed. There are a couple of questions here, mostly are related to the smoke evacuating systems. Ravik has been answering them on the screen. The dress code and other things that are for patients that come into the hospital, do they also have to have some kind of dress code? Many of them have an overcover clothing on. How do we handle such situations?
So minimum they should have is the face mask for everybody. Beyond that, there is no recommendation at present.
Yeah, we cannot take a call on that because it's more a governmental mandate that will have to be. We have to respect the dress code of whatever the person is used to wearing. However, we will insist on the mask being used. Is there any time difference between when a surgeon can enter the OT after the intubation, or does the surgeon, everybody stay around while the patient is being taken under?
Yeah, this recommendation is there that has been touched upon. See, the first step after the patient enters, it is the anesthetist and the anesthesia assistant who will do the intubation, everything, because intubation and extubation is a aerosol generating procedure. So at that time, there is no need for surgeon to be inside. There is no the scrub nurse or the circulating nurse to be inside. It is only the anesthetist and his assistant. Minimum number of staff. Once the intubation is done, everything is ready, then the surgeon and the nurse will enter the OT. And after the procedure, again, before the extubation, the surgeon, assistant surgeon, and the nurses, they come out of the OT, and the anesthetist and the anesthetist assistant will extubate and then shift the patient out of the OT. Most of the time, if possible, it's better not to shift to recovery room or ICU or anything. Better they go straight to the ward itself. And between two cases, we give sufficient time for the air exchanges, cleaning to occur, and the people who have assisted everything to get themselves take some relaxation and hand sanitization, all those things.
One point that has come up in these questions is that if you're wearing a PPE, how do you do your hand scrub prior to OT?
Okay, so that is
like in orthopedic procedures and other things.
Correct. This is there. I think you have to look into the video of the PPE
Donning
and also donning and doffing, and that will make it very clear, because regular PPE is not required in all the other OTs where there is no COVID cases are being operated or anything. So what we are all doing is COVID suspect, take precautions along with that. So what we do is first, after the wash everything, wear one glove, and then wear the OT dress, suit, everything, and after that wear the another glove over that, so that we are not touching anything or anything. That's how. Better to wear two gloves, one first, then wear the dress, and then finally wear the other gloves.
For the routine use in the OPDs and other areas where we are supposed to use gloved hands, is there any difference between the latex glove and the nitrile gloves? You know, the nitrile, the bluer colored, little thicker ones, little cumbersome, little more sticky.
Right.
Or can we just do with the latex? Latex, the problem is perhaps more easily puncturable, and contamination can occur. Is there any recommendation on that?
I didn't come across any of the recommendation. It's only for our protection. So if you are not puncturing or anything, it should be okay. Yeah.
Yeah, because there are two types. There's that yellow latex type, and there's this rubber-derived nitrile type.
Right.
So some people are saying that you need only nitrile gloves.
Right.
It's important not to waste our surgically sterile gloves for these kind of routine activities.
Right.
Any questions there? Can we go through the panel box, chat box, and see, doctor, if there's anything that you need to answer?
So one question I saw, that whether we should use the smoke evacuator even for open surgery. So there are a lot of cauteries which come along with suction. It is even open surgery also, it can produce the smoke and we can inhale. It's always better to suck it out and take out the smoke before it comes out. So better you use the cautery with suction so that that is evacuated then and there. Otherwise you have to use another separate suction to, even in open surgeries, to remove the smoke. It's important.
About COVID testing now, I'd like to make it very clear that it is not necessary to test every patient for every elective surgery for the COVID test. It is to be treated as if COVID positive and done the needful. The importance is on the history and the examination to make sure that the patient does not have anything suggestive of COVID infection before we take them on. It is also a problem because we do not have enough adequate COVID testing kits available.
Right.
And only certain centers have it. So patients are going up and down here and they're trying to get tested. But when they go for the tests to that center, that person says, hey, you don't have any symptoms. Why do we are not going to do the test for you? Are we going to refuse the hernia repair for him because he was refused a COVID test? That is a matter that we have to see as we move along. But I think we should just treat everybody as being possibly COVID positive and take all maximum precautions.
Yes, that is true.
Who will reflect the cost of these PPEs and all? It comes into hospital charges or the patient has to bear it?
So it is many hospitals have included in the package and other things, but it has to be borne by the patient only.
Yeah.
But many of the hospitals realizing that it is becoming a big, because PPEs, when we use the surgeon, assistant, and the anesthetist, everybody, it becomes quite an expensive thing. So they are charging only whatever is the over other extra charges they are not putting, and try to minimize as much as possible in these cases.
Dr. Preeti has asked about OPD procedures like corn excision, etc. Doctor, for that we recommend that you have a standard precaution. Use the plastic apron, that is the minimum, and the standard double gloving technique. And more important, your face, your mask and your visor to be used even for all surgical procedures.
Yeah.
So contact time and your exposure time is minimal, so the chances of you getting an infection are much less. And you have to, you need not wear the full PPE, but you can go ahead and do the procedure in the outpatient in your, like a suture removal or a paronychia IND or whatever.
The disposable face shield is available for 60 or 80 rupees. So it should not be very difficult to acquire and use it. Better to use this, as Dr. Rajan said. Dr. Aruna is asking whether laminar flow in the OT is required always. See, laminar flow is not a must. What is important is the air exchanges in the OT, and it is not a stagnant inside the OT. So you need not go always for the laminar flow, and if you are using the smoke evacuator and other precautions, that should be enough, good enough.
What is the role of ultraviolet sterilizers, Doc? Many people are coming around asking for ultraviolet sterilizers.
A lot of companies also have come up. See, one thing good about this virus is it can be easily killed. You need not have any very high-end equipment. Whether you autoclave, whether you use soap, whether you use sodium hypochlorite solution, it gets killed. So ultraviolet rays should be good enough to this one. I don't see any studies for this, but putting it into the other viruses, UV rays are good enough to destroy it.
Okay.
Dr. Nandish from Mandya is asking, can we use HIV kit with face shield for major surgery? That should be good enough, but HIV kit, that should be water repellent, and the face mask, what is come, you see whether it's comfortable to wear and do the surgery. That should be also good enough.
It is important to note that it is the head and neck area that needs the maximum protection in this particular disease. The rest of the body, yes, by prolonged contact and water and dampness, you can have a source of inoculation of infection. But the main problem is the aerosol inhalation that occurs of these droplets of viral particles. So it is the head and neck area that needs proper and complete care. Doctor, if there are no ETO facilities or any other way to sterilize N95 masks?
No, if you are no ETO facilities, better to throw off that mask after the use of 6 hours or 8 hours and use a different N95 mask. I don't see any other solution like UV rays or anything may not help in these things. Either ETO sterilization or the steroid you can use for sterilization. Otherwise, I don't see. Our infectious disease specialist recommended that N95 mask can be reused for certain number of times if we are ETO doing it after the use of the mask for that day.
Dr. S.K. Mishra, senior surgeon, has asked, is the need for COVID testing before surgery and what are medico-legal implications? Can you just go through that, because that's Again, please, I know you did touch upon it. Please repeat what is the correct recommendation for consent for about the COVID infection. Need
So
for COVID testing before and medical or legal implications. If you are doing a case, you have not done a COVID test, but in the post-op he develops COVID positivity, what is your liabilities?
This is again, see, I think one thing I want to tell everybody, don't depend totally on the COVID test.
It is not a foolproof test, you see.
Not a foolproof test. Just because you have done a COVID test, so it can say about 70% or so. You have to take a proper history of the patient, fever, throat pain, and the contact history, everything. And with all the things also, patients, COVID may come positive after the surgery or so. There is no medical legal liability because you have already explained to the patient that it's a pandemic situation. There is a situation where patient can get the, not only patient, even we also can get the COVID all over, whether in the ward, hospital or outside also. So that's why we are covering with the consent. So whether the question is to whether to do COVID test or not, or it's only consent, sir? I didn't see
both COVID test and the consent.
COVID test, it is better to do for our own safety whenever possible, whenever it is available, before doing any elective surgery and also emergency surgery. Emergency surgery, what happens? The test report may come after the surgery. Till then, we are treating that patient as a COVID positive patient. After the test results comes negative, he can be shifted to any regular ward and treated as per other patients with all due precautions. But in the elective surgery, if whenever it's possible and feasible availability, it's better to do the surgery. It gives more confidence to the surgeon. And also we need not waste high-end PPE for these patients and all the other requirements every day using a lot of precautions. Those things can be avoided in these cases. So whenever possible, whenever available, better to do the COVID test and then take for surgery. Whenever it's not feasible, not available, better to take more precautions and more of the care and history, everything you have to depend on that.
It goes back to my age-old saying that basically apply common sense.
Yes.
You are. I always pride myself of having those initials, common sense. So you have to be practical and adjust to the situation.
Nothing is.
You cannot be 100% certain on anything. Life is so unpredictable. Who predicted COVID and other things 2 months ago? But we have had to deal with the situation as it crops up, and it is evolving. And we still don't have definite guidelines on anything. But we have got certain bits of information on which we should act on. And among that is the personal protection of the surgeon has to be increased, and the surgical and healthcare teams has to be increased during this period. Some people are asking why some surgeons died because they acquired infection while they were operating. Now, it is very important to understand two things. The virus has its effect related to the viral load that the patient got and the host immunity, the immunity of that particular person. If you have a high viral load with low immunity, at that point in time, you succumb. But if you have a low viral load and good immunity, you don't have any symptoms. If you have a low viral load and low immunity, you may get a clinical infection and you may need an ICU care, but you will come out. But it is when the high viral load comes into a immunocompromised or a weakened situation, like a bad diabetic uncontrolled, like a heart failure with cardiac muscle hypertrophy, like the immunocompromised due to medications and other things, they are the ones that are going down with the disease. It is important to analyze the health status of the person before saying, oh, he's a COVID death. Yes, unfortunately, he is a COVID death, but it happened because his immune systems were a little low. And that is what we are trying to say. Improve your immunity, go out, meet people, go around for the walks and other things, strengthen your immune systems so that you're able to deal with the low dose infection, get across your infection phase, and then see what will happen. This pandemic is here with us to stay. It is going to be part of our lives. It is our duty to adjust to these things and move on. We cannot say stagnant also. So that is why I think we've had an hour and a half of very exciting, important, valuable exchange of information. Can we now draw this to a close, sir?
Sure, sir. I think
Can you just scroll through your question answer box and see if there are anything questions that need to be answered? There's one Q&A at the bottom of the screen.
Yes, I think Ravi also answered a lot of questions. There are plenty
and that was on the chat, but on the Q&A box.
250 surgeons have participated.
Mm.
I think there is it's a problem everybody is facing, and it's nice that our Medtronics organized this interaction, and Dr. Rajan has given a lot of wisdom, and we have tried to cover as much as possible. If there is anything particular, definitely you can contact me or Dr. Rajan. We will try to find out our best and do whatever best possible to answer your queries. I think if everything okay with the Deepa also, we'll call it a day. Deepa?
Deepa, can you take over, please?
Yes, sir. I think this is, I think it's been a great discussion. Thank you so much, sir. Thanks a lot, Dr. Shivram. Thanks a lot, Dr. Rajan. And thank you to all the participants who have attended. I think we've had a great event today and looking forward to more. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good
you.
night.
Yes,
Sweet
well,
sleep.
thank you so much for everything.
And I hope your dreams are not COVID filled, so that
I really hope so.
and we have a good response to the situation, to the pandemic, with the best possible service to the patients going through. All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ravi. Thank you.